Well, hello again, my beautiful friends. Here we are on another podcast episode about sovereignty. To be honest, I chose this series on sovereignty because it's my word for the year. And I wanted to explore it deeply within myself and to find the pitfalls or to find where I get lost in the question of how's your sovereignty, and tried to look at it and see if I could realize, like, uh, where does truth come into sovereignty? I had a lot of questions about it. So we are on our sixth episode already, but I want to kind of review where we've been so far. So if you missed an episode, you may want to go back and catch up. They all stand alone and should make you think deeply. But we started out just defining why sovereignty matters and defining it. I found in this episode, maybe even a better understanding of that definition. So I'm going to be talking about that today, but that was our first episode. Then we went into how do we get trapped in urgency and what that has to do with our sovereignty. I, for one, created a lot of urgency, or I let someone else's urgency rob me of my sovereignty. My people pleasing came through. And then we talked about how to normalize um, the the uneasy feeling, the discomfort that comes when our bodies, our nervous system, our minds need to rest, not just sleep, but to rest and to reset. And that was episode 3. And then episode 4 is what happens when we are still. Maybe when we rest, maybe when we meditate, stuff shows up. Our mind sometimes gets busier. The voices in our head often get louder, and it's so uncomfortable to be still. And part of the mindfulness journey is learning to sit with that, learning to listen to what you hear when you are in stillness, rather than saying, oh my gosh, I got to get out of here. Let me go back into the noise of the world. It seems easier to tolerate than the noise of my inner world. But newsflash, that inner world noise is what creates your life. We create from those voices, those undercover belief systems, all of it. And it actually is not living a sovereign life. So we're going to learn more about that today. But that was episode 4 of the Sovereign series. Just what happens to you when you sit in the stillness. And then last time we talked about waking up to all of this. You know, awakenings, how they come to us. Sometimes they're gradual. Sometimes they just seem to be like Mother Nature. We get to a certain age and we wake up and look around and think, what am I doing? I don't believe in midlife crises. I think crises come because we think about a crisis, but I rather call them midlife awakenings. It's a time where we just naturally look around and say, is everything that I've built in alignment to who I'm becoming, who I want to be, who I actually am? So that was our last episode. And today we're going to talk about how to find our and hold on to the steadiness of truth. And this is really where the rubber meets the road for me. This is really, I was surprised because without realizing it, this is kind of the foundation of what my coaching programs and definitely the foundation of my retreats is how to stand in our truth, how to live, how to choose, how to think about things that are aligned with absolute truth. We believe a lot of things are true that actually really aren't. And so we're going to talk about that. So, one of the questions that I would like you to contemplate is, why might you have a breakthrough moment? Whether it's life gave you a breakthrough moment, you are all of a sudden having an aha moment, whether you have a breakthrough at a retreat or a gathering for personal growth. And then only to go back to the life you were leading before that aha and lose it. Why does clarity feel absolutely undeniable one day and disappear the next? Why do old patterns that aren't serving us anymore return the moment we start to feel lonely or tired or rejected or judged or unseen or uncertain or scared? Why is it that we abandon ourselves after getting a glimpse at the truth of who we are? And why does peace feel harder to hold on to than chaos? Or why does peace feel harder to hold on to than anything else? Where do you lose your inner peace? Because when we doubt and we worry about something, we've lost our inner peace. We've lost it. It's hard to hold on to when maybe someone we love is hurting. It's hard to hold on to it when our bank account is in the red. It's hard to hold on to that peace when the world is so polarized. So, why does sovereignty require steadiness from us? It requires it. We have to stay steady and aligned in our truth, our absolute truth. And for me, I had to learn that that wasn't necessarily perfection, but steadiness. And I got those two mixed up until I was really digging into this part for this podcast today. So, we're going to talk about one of the most important words in this series, which is sovereignty. Because if we do not define it clearly and correctly, I guess we could do it incorrectly, but it's hard to embody it consistently because we aren't built to embody falsehoods. They cause us to lose our peace. And if we're going to maintain it, we have to have a definition of it so we can embody it consistently. We're not built to stay there, you guys. It's not the goal to never, ever uh, live outside of the lines. It's not a rigid thing that we're creating here in this conversation because we're just organic humans having human experiences. You know, we have built-in systems for handling and managing our fear. And we have less developed systems that automatically take us back to what is true. And so this is a series that's helping us build the muscle to return to who we are and to remember our truth and live from that, choose from that. So if we don't understand truth, then we spend our lives fighting over opinions that we call truth, but are missing wisdom. So, are you all ready to dive in with me? Welcome back to sovereignty. And, it's not about mindset. It's not. We cannot think our way into sovereignty. And it's not just about healing. We can't heal everything in order to stay there. I think our whole lifetime is healing and getting to the point where maybe we're breaking even on that, but life hurts. Life happens and it'll leave us in fear. We'll have experiences of someone hurting our feelings, of rejection. And so it reopens woundedness, and we have to come back again and again. So it's not about just healing or just mindset. It's not about meditation or success or spirituality and being empowered. I know lots of empowered women who are not sovereign underneath it. It's a performance of empowerment. And it takes doing the work to really understand that in order to fully embody it. So this is about self-governance, getting into our inner authority and becoming the woman or the man who no longer abandons herself or himself when life gets hard and loud. So, we talked about awakening. Awakening is the first step. And a lot of times, awakening comes like a thunderstorm. Sometimes it comes through like a hurricane or a tornado. Really, like you have to hunker down until it gets past you and then come out and look around. And that step is getting aware, awakened, but then aware. Awakening's one thing. Making a choice is one thing. But staying aligned when that pressure comes through, staying aligned when you're faced with fear, staying aligned when you're triggered by someone, which, by the way, if you haven't figured it out by now, we're not triggered by someone else. Someone else shines a light on our triggers. They live inside us. And so, how do we stay aligned when all that stuff happens to us? How do we never abandon ourselves and our truth in the midst of that? And that's where sovereignty is built. It's a muscle. That's what I looked at this and thought, that's why it's not like I have an awakening to sovereignty. I am sovereign. And understanding the embodiment of what it means to be a sovereign person, human, is an awareness. And it's a muscle that I have to build, I have to strengthen. And the more I focus on building that strength in my sovereignty, the less the world gets to have a say on who I am and what I do. So sovereignty is often, referenced referred to in terms of like governments and nations. We are a sovereign nation. What does that mean? And I think we're in the midst of defining what that really means to us, and if our nation itself is living true to the sovereignty. And I'm not a political podcast, but it is such a such a ripe orchard of of different ways to look at sovereignty. So, this for me, I want to take it out of the governing authorities and into more of a spiritual path, the spiritual the spiritual journey into sovereignty. So we're not going to think of it in terms of like politics or rebellions or control, independence. Some people get independent in a non-sovereign way, and it's a belief that says, I don't need anybody. I'm independent. I don't need anyone. And we are not wired that way. We as humans need community. We need connection. So the goal of independence in that way, in that terminology, doesn't align to our sovereignty. Doesn't mean that you get to do whatever you want, or that, you don't need anyone, or even being above other people in order to control. None of that is what we're talking about. That is not what I mean. So if that's how you've previously thought about sovereignty, I ask you to open your mind so that you start to think about it in terms of spiritual growth, your spiritual path. So what it means to me is sovereignty is the ability to govern your inner life rather than be governed by fear, by past wounds and traumas, by conditioning, by culture, by world events, or by anything of the external world, especially approval. So it's the ability to govern your inner life rather than letting the external life you live define you. So I want you to let that land. I want you to think about, what is my ability to govern my inner life? How well do you do if you're upset with your partner or your children or your family? Another ripe orchard to go into some triggers. Not the economy, not whether someone texted you back, not how many likes you get on your post. No one's opinion should interfere with your inner life. I know for me, I lived and still gravitate toward control. I still am a people pleaser as a way of gaining control so that nothing goes out of control. It's like, I'll please everybody and make sure everybody's okay so that I can be okay, because my nervous system couldn't handle it if conflict rose, right? So, what is our inner life, actually? That is our reactions, our reactivity. Our inner life holds our identity, our nervous system. It is the guardian of our thoughts and our beliefs and our standards, our values, our priorities, our choices. All of it goes on inside of us. And even deeper than that, it's the capacity to live from your inner truth, aligned with spiritual law, without surrendering yourself to fear or pressure or anything that is an external condition. That is sovereignty to me. Am I able to live from my truth, aligned with spiritual law, which we're going to talk about, without giving it up to something going on in the outside world, in our external world? How much do you let that external world define who you are? Are they in alignment? Or is there a separation of who you know yourself to be and who the world sees, how you show up? Oh man, for most of my life, I was terrified to show up as me. I always felt a little like I couldn't really relate to anybody else very well. And I did learn to people please, and I did learn to fit in. And I learned, because I was a people pleaser, I was a good friend to many and not a great friend to myself, because I started letting my value and my worth get defined by something in the external. And so, wow, learning this, showing up on a podcast, and to be honest, I let you hear my voice, and now uh, my podcast producer invited me to let the video be seen on YouTube, and so really showing up and allowing you to look into my inner world on this podcast has been a huge exercise in building the sovereignty muscle. I'm still in it, you guys. Like, nobody just masters it overnight. I know I don't. Maybe you will, but I don't think so. So, why is it that people get confused around this? And maybe you don't. Maybe this is spot on for you, but it's been like the fog had to lift for me on this, which is why I created the series, because I know I'm probably not alone. But here's why so many people get stuck. They'll say, I'm just trying to live in truth. I'm just telling the truth, and they're mad at me. I was just saying something, the truth about what happened, and they don't think that's what happened. I don't know what to do with that, right? Well, there's different layers of truth. Truth isn't that easy. And truth is so directly, inner truth is a part of our sovereignty. It's a foundation. So I want to spend some time talking about that. Okay. So there are two types of truth. And try to hang with me here. We are human beings. Okay. The human will have what we call a relative truth. It's a human lives in a 3D world. We see through our eyes, we hear, we have sensory perception, we experience, something that we then translate in our brain. For example, this can be ridiculous, but let's say two people are sitting on a park bench and there is a food truck cooking, and the wind wafts down, and one person says, "Man, that smells good." And the other said, "Are you kidding? It smells like dog poop. What are you smelling?" Okay. Two different sensory truths going on. Who's right? Who's to say who's right? But you guys, when I work with couples or I work with someone through a friendship issue, relationship issue, even an inner world, an inner knowing issue where they get in that conflict, which one is true? How do you prove that someone is smelling something that smells like dog poop and the other thinks it smells like really good food? It, both are right based on their inner experience, right? But boy, do we spend a lot of time, money, and energy trying to prove our relative truth. It is pointless. It is a waste of time and energy because they're both right. For you, I see, that's what that smells like. Well, maybe we should move to a different bench. If it makes you uncomfortable, I know it's making me hungry. So let's just move to a different park bench, right? How simple that would be. But people will get into a total argument over what was true in that silly scenario. And it happens day in and day out. I know that you probably have been in that situation. But that relative truth on the human side of things, it is based on perception. Sometimes it's based on our memory. You might remember it one way and I can remember it another, but guess what? We can't prove it. Everybody gets to be right because our memory is selective. And even then, 5 years from now, when they're sitting on the park bench saying, "Remember that time when I thought it smelled so good and you thought it smelled like dog poop?" And that person says, that never happened. I don't remember that. They just let it go and they don't remember it. Who's to say that it's right, wrong, truth, or a lie. And they get in an argument again. It's also influenced by our emotions and our wounds. They they cloud our perception so much. If you are wounded around abandonment and someone is over there um, feeling abandoned, going through an experience of abandonment, your bias is toward a rescue, a relatability to that, right? Without really knowing if they actually were abandoned. You buy into the story because you know that story, and that wound is still alive and it creates a bias. Timing influences it. Our nervous system, the state of what is our nervous system doing right now. I am seeing so many clients who have a fried nervous system, which is another reason why this series is so important to me, because in order to live as a sovereign woman, I have to take care of myself. I have to take care of that nervous system, especially. And another influencer is our own personal experience with something. A lot of times we rush in saying, we know, they'll say, oh, this happened to me at work. And somebody says, I know exactly how you feel. Well, guess what? Their personal experience might not be the same. It may not. We overlay personal experience over someone else's story all the time. I know exactly how you feel. Really? Do you? Because we are each made up of perception and memory and thoughts and beliefs and wounds and traumas and personal experience and nervous system regulation situations. Nobody has walked a mile in our shoes to really, really understand. So those are all what I call relative truth in the 3D human experience. And they're not a good argument against somebody else's relative truth. The best tool, if you find yourself in that situation, is to say, I'm listening. I'm listening and I hear you. And not, you're wrong. That didn't happen. You're not right. You should do this, whatever. So, relative truth can sound like, this is what happened from my perspective when you're expressing a relative truth. This is how I experienced that. Nobody can, they can try to argue it, but you can't tell me how I'm experiencing something. So, if someone deeply insensitive says something that maybe really hurt, it's okay for me to say, you know what, when you said that, this is how I experienced it. It hurt really deep, which lets me know that I still have a lot of work to do around this. But going forward, it would be great if you practice some sensitivity if you can, while I let this heal. Or another way to answer is, well, this is what it meant to me. This is what it meant to me. Because relative truth matters, where it is our human experience with one another. And in that relative truth, pain matters. And the experiences that we have, they matter. And the impact of what's going on around us, it matters. And two people can experience the same exact event and hold very different truths about it. And accepting that is such a big pivot in communication breakdowns. Two people can be so sincere, they can feel right. They both can be carrying very valid pain points, right? But the place they go to with those pain points is often to blame the person for hurting them instead of owning the pain. And that, in order to do that work, you have to form a different relationship with a different truth, which we're going to talk about it. But I want you to think about where you might see this going on in your life. Is it going on in any of your family relationships? Is it, do you have a friendship that might be suffering because of relative truths disagreeing? Are you enrolled in that with politics or the culture you're in? Because in some of those, what I see is everyone trying to prove that they're right and the other party is wrong. And that path is just a path straight into the heart of suffering because we have no capacity to even fathom why someone would have a different relative truth. And I see it. But I'll deviate into politics because I worry about our country. I worry about how polarized we are. And when I have a client, and I have clients on both ends of this spectrum, and I listen carefully. I'm not here to change someone or to have an opinion about how they feel. I'm here to support them in living their truth and lead them to what is the absolute truth that unites us, rather than fighting with people on relative truths that divide us. When you listen to why someone feels the way they feel without trying to educate them or course correct or prove they're wrong or cite your references, but just listen what matters to them. I guarantee you that at the bottom of every reason they vote the way they vote or believe the way they believe is a core value, and a core value that matters greatly to them, right? We all have different life experiences that shape that. So allow them to have theirs and find the where you do align. And that's the segue into what is absolute truth. Because there is a deeper truth, and it's a principle-based truth from being, from the beingness of us, okay? A principle-based truth can land in a relative truth over on the human side. For example, my principle is to respect and honor all life. Um, I have a principle that says that we should not be at war. Okay, that's a principle-based relative truth. What would be the spiritual truth? And it doesn't depend on anyone's mood or preference or agreement. That spiritual truth, the absolute truth. So rather than be in, I don't believe in war, therefore you're wrong about supporting this war, right? What did that just start? It started their own mini war in an argument. So that's an example of a universal law. And I'm going to talk about the laws, but that is one of them, which is cause and effect, right? I have a belief, I have thoughts about, or I take action about speaking my truth around my beliefs and choices and my thoughts regarding war. And the action I take is to oppose someone. You might disagree. It's not violent to do that. And we do get to live in our relative truth. But what happens is that it can divide us. So we have to go up in our frequency. I call it the bird's eye view, right? We have to go up in our frequency and connect with universal law where spiritual absolute truths live and are supported. It impresses upon those. We are all connected. When we cause harm to one, it reverberates through to the whole. But what we're not recognizing is that when we don't listen with love and see someone in their divinity, then we are separating from them. It is when we look at our oneness that we are aligned. And so I know that you probably have questions arising around this concept, but hang with me for a little bit. Some people will say there's really one absolute universal law, and that is cause and effect. And I am the cause of that effect. And boy, do people resist this one. When I bring it into my coaching sessions, okay, how did you cause that? I didn't cause anything. They started, they did that. Well, let's back up a step. How did you get there? Did you get in your car and you went out in the world and you got in the intersection and somebody hit you? Well, I went out in the world. And anytime we get in our car and drive, we set ourselves up to be in an accident. It could happen. Someone else can be distracted and run into us. That's just something that's got, we probably all had that accident. Did I cause the accident? No. But did I help create it by being there at that time and point in time? Yes. And why do we take responsibility? Why? Why would we think that would make sense? I'm curious if you know why the universal law of cause and effect is so important to our sovereignty, to living our truth. And I would love for you to think about that, why it's so important. But I'm going to tell you that without it, then we're victims. And I don't think anybody in their sovereignty wants to feel trapped in victimhood. I don't think the two mix very well because you're not able to live your truth if you're a victim, right? I guess you can live your relative truth, but absolute truth asks you to rise above that relative truth. Absolute truth, supported by universal law, liberates you, empowers you, strengthens you, gives you confidence, rewards you. Because when you live from your sovereignty with absolute truth backing you up, you also are in charge of that effect. And you're in heaven at that point. The more you live with that sovereignty, living your absolute truth, you bring heaven to earth. Because the only real baseline is that of love. That's all that's real in this world. Truly, that is all that is real. In our absolute truth, love created us. Love is all that's real. The rest is illusion, stories, fears, doubts, worries, resentments, jealousy, envy, anger. Those aren't real. They're relative truths about the human experience. They're expressions of what it's like to be a human. Very true in that respect, right? But we are so much more than a human. We forget. I mean, some people say, I'm only human. And I say, no, you're a human being. That's where your sovereignty lives, in the beingness. It's where your power lives, in your beingness. We're a human being. I would like to say that we are beings having a human experience. Beings came first and go last. They are eternal. Our divinity is a non-negotiable eternity because energy can't be destroyed. That's proven in physics. whatever your religious or spiritual belief is about life and death, just know that energy cannot be destroyed. It's proven through physics. So, what happens to us? We return to an energy form. Now, that we can debate of what happens to us. What happens? Is it spiritually? Do we just evaporate into the cosmos or what? And that's a whole nother podcast. I love this topic though. So going back to cause and effect, the law of cause and effect, you are the cause. Okay. The law of reciprocity, what is given comes back tenfold. So give love. That's what's real. Or we give advice, or we give opinions, or we give judgment, or we give consequences. Even if we think them, it will come back. Our thoughts are so powerful. And when you stop and hear some of the things that we think that would never say, they still are energy. They're still an energy form. Our thought form goes out, and suddenly I just had an opinion about somebody, and all of a sudden, I don't know why that lady pulling out in front of me and flipping me off had to give me her opinion of my driving. I wonder why. Oh, yeah. I was sharing an opinion about somebody in my thought just before that happened. And you start to notice the patterns. It is really hilarious most of the time if you can take it. It can be brutal otherwise. The law of reciprocity, what you give returns. The law of vibration, and that's what you feel. Our feelings have a frequency. Our emotions carry measured frequency. David Hawkins did a book called Power versus Force. You've probably heard me reference that book. And he measured the frequency. And the human emotions that are uncomfortable are a frequency below 200. Shame, guilt. There's a lot of heavy emotions. Even grief is a human relative truth, right? Because the law of oneness says there's no real separation. So we aren't really separate through anything. And in the Christian theology, Christ came to show us oneness. Even death could not destroy. We are still all one big cosmos of energy. We're all connected. So the law of oneness, the law of cause and effect, the law of reciprocity, the law of vibration, which means that frequency goes out. And if I'm angry and I'm out there snapping at people, I get more things to get angry about. It's a law that I caused more things to happen that I could be angry about because I was putting out a frequency of anger or sadness or joy or bliss. They all create the frequency. Like attracts like, right? So, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of universal laws supporting what we're talking about. So, I've been in a spiritual psychology course and now am a spiritual psychology practitioner, still learning, still growing, and still practicing, an E4 trauma coach. And I have learned so much from the spiritual psychology school in the last year that it has made life make so much more sense. And I go deep. So I apologize if I'm losing you or I'm getting passionate around something and you're like, what is she talking about? Hang with me. I'm going to get circled back to what we're talking about, but it all matters, you guys. And I want I want to take my listeners deep. I take my clients deep. And I recognize that it's important to stop where they're able to integrate, right? But what I believe is that when you hear truth, you feel it in your body, it lands. It's like something about what she's talking about makes sense. But we're disrupting all these mental constructs that we have come up with in our time here as a human that are getting shuffled, and that can feel uncomfortable, but it lands and you feel it and you think it because, why do I know this? Because truth seeks truth. So when you are hearing it, there is something in you ready to hear what I have to say about this. And your mental constructs might start a debate about it. And that's great. That's great when that happens. I love for people to bring the debate into our coaching sessions because we get to land on what is actually true. So I want to talk about identity because identity determines our behavior. Most people try to change habits, our habits, which build the construct, right? But they don't work on changing their identity. And our identity is what determines our behaviors, which become our habits. And so that's why I like to go way deeper than just saying, well, pick up a new habit. Why does it not work? What happens when we try to start the habit of a spiritual practice every day? And then all of a sudden we realize we stopped somewhere along the way, or we're going to exercise every day and get in the habit and we do it for 21 days and something magic is going to happen that after that, it won't take anything. We'll just do it. But then it drops off again. If that happens, then it's not aligned with an inner identity. And what are those limiting beliefs that have become your identity? Maybe an identity of I'm not important, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm too much, I'm a bird just came flying toward the window. I'm not enough. Have to have others define my value. Identities that chaos is my normal. I am a chaos tamer. When we say I am and then put something like chaos tamer out behind it, is that an identity that you want to live from? Because then it's going to bring you all the chaos in the world over and over. But if you have an attachment to an identity that says that is how I am needed, I have to earn my love. See how identities, they're hidden in there. I am unworthy. Even worse, I am worthless. There's an identity that's attached to a pretty strong depression, right? So once you adopt these identities, and we have many, I am a people pleaser, right? That's what I used to say. I'm a people pleaser. I owned it. But I don't want to build more experiences pleasing people or experiencing the pain of not pleasing them, which is resistance of that identity. And what we resist persists. And so I have to not just say, I'm not a people pleaser. I have to adopt a whole new identity around that, which brings me to my sovereignty. Okay. So, how often is your life reflecting an identity that maybe you realize now that isn't serving you anymore? Do you tolerate things that are actually harmful to you, to your well being? Do you find yourself chasing people who are unavailable? Do you overgive? Do you overserve? Do you fear stillness and silence? Do you get uncomfortable when peace arrives? The truth is that as a human, we keep recreating what is familiar, because familiar, we learned to survive. So if you were in a childhood where violence was familiar and you learned how to survive it, what you will resort to is attracting the same, because you already know how to thrive even in that environment at your own expense, right? You can't thrive in something that is unhealthy for you. It's like asking a cactus to thrive in a rainforest. They get soggy and wet and fall apart. So if your identity says something like, I am a beautiful expression of life, I love that identity because it allows me to experience life in its fullest, which is a full spectrum of the good, the bad, the ugly, right? But I am a beautiful expression of life. My choices matter. That's an identity. My voice has power in it. Now, it can also, in a relative truth, overpower others when that's not sovereignty. But my voice has power when it's delivered from a place of sovereignty. It has a chance to make a difference. Love and integrity are my strength. I honor my boundaries. I am guided and growing, which for me as a recovering perfectionist, watching my language, I am no longer being identified as a perfectionist, but I spent most of my life as one, and I am guided and I'm growing and I'm healing that. Then when I stand in those kinds of identities, the behavior changes. And when the behavior changes, my thoughts about it change, about what's happening. And then my feelings change, my energy changes, and all of that creates a different result. And that's what it looks like when our sovereignty is put into motion. Okay. So let's talk about, why do we keep abandoning ourselves after we have that breakthrough? We wake up. Sometimes the universe hits us in the head with a 2x4 and we are stunned for a little bit. And then we look around and we're aware that now I have a pattern of this happening to me. Why does this keep happening to me? We hear that, but we don't stop to answer. Why? Why does that keep happening? Let's look at that, because that is your creation. That is a pattern you are attracting into your life through the law of attraction. Let's dig underneath it. And then you start to see things very clearly. This relationship is draining to me. I need boundaries. Then you start to see clearly, I matter too. I matter. I need rest. I've been betraying myself to please others. I believe I'm meant for more than what I'm settling for. And the pace I'm keeping is unsustainable. Well, that person who sees that, she feels powerful to me. And then 3 days later, we hop on a car and on a call, and she goes back. She goes back to old identities. Why? Because a revelation is not the same as embodiment. Let me say that again. Having a revelation is not the same as an embodiment of that truth. So the mind can awaken quickly, and the nervous system changes slower. And old patterns that once kept us safe die hard. Right? People pleasing for me prevented rejection. Just because I have the awareness I'm a people pleaser and I don't like rejection doesn't mean I'm no longer going to be rejected. Overworking sometimes brought me self worth in a false way. Chaos began at one time in my life, felt normal. Self abandonment helped me feel like I could belong to someone. So when truth arrives, guess what? Our old identity feels threatened. When absolute truth arrives at your doorstep, the old identity knows who's knocking and feels threatened. It pulls you back. So it's hard work, isn't it? Clarity comes when it's calm. But when things are pressured, what gets revealed is how we've been conditioned. When money tightens, or when someone withdraws affection, or when our results are delayed, or criticism appears, or loneliness sinks in, or uncertainty arises. Suddenly, old thoughts return right along with that, with those feelings, right? Those are all feelings that we experience: rejection and loneliness and sadness or grief. And we start having a new thought that says, maybe I was wrong about this. New revelation. Maybe I was asking for too much. Maybe I should just settle. Maybe I do need to chase the shiny objects or the new relationship. Maybe I should go back to my old ways. This is why sovereignty requires us to be steady and not perfect. You do not need to never, ever, ever wobble in your sovereignty. You just need to know how to return to it, because sovereignty is where we began, right? So pay attention. If you are lonely, if you're tired, if you're overworked, if you've recently experienced rejection, if you feel unseen or unheard, if you're uncertain about what you're doing or scared or in a faith crisis, then recognize my discernment is compromised in those moments of intense emotion or tiredness or overwhelm. Our discernment is compromised, and we'll reach for what I call our old medicine. And I'll send a text to the wrong person. I'll over explain myself. I'll overspend. Maybe I'll numb out through scrolling, or some people through substances. Maybe I'll rescue somebody so I can feel all good about myself again. Maybe I'll abandon the boundaries I just set. Maybe I'll take some type of like frantic action, or maybe I'll just sit here and doubt myself and get nothing done. It doesn't mean you failed if you do that. Heaven knows I sure have. But it does mean that you need support, and you need regulation, and you need someone to remind you gently of your truth, hold you in that truth. I call it hold you in your divinity, and do that with compassion for where you are, because you've temporarily forgot your divinity. Temporary vulnerability is not a permanent identity. So remember that too. Steadiness and truth means that I feel lonely and I do not betray myself. It means I can feel scared and I still choose wisely. Or I can feel uncertain, but I keep walking. I feel rejection or rejected, and I still know my value. Or I feel pressure and I can remain kind and hold my boundaries. I feel tired, so I'm going to honor what I know really matters right now. Truth is often quiet, and fear, most of the time, well, it's pretty loud. And truth can feel very simple. And fear, well, it's a dramatic. And if we have an addiction to drama, then we're going to live from fear and keep creating it until we can't anymore, until our nervous system says, stop, please, just stop. Truth is steady and fear is urgent. So going back to the episode about urgency, it's something rooted in fear. It's very much compromising your sovereignty. So how do we hold the line? How do we hold that line long enough for life to actually reorganize? Most people I know quit too soon, and it's like leaving the gym because it got too hard. They choose differently for a week and then they go, nothing really changed, but life, it doesn't happen instantly. We have a whole lot of projected thoughts creating our reality out here. And our reality in the 3D world is created from relative truth. And so it organizes itself first in our nervous system. When you make a change from sovereignty to sovereignty from fear, our nervous system starts to settle. We start to gain self-respect. We have different emotional patterns. We raise our standards. We change our identity and live from our identity that now works for us. And then externally, we start to see opportunities, new relationships, healthy relationships. Our income is impacted. We see changes in our health and in our environment. So therefore, our entire relative truth of reality. When you hold the line, reality often shakes before it resets, but it's happening. So practical tools. In the morning, ask yourself, what is true today, right now? How would the sovereign version of me move through my day? If you get triggered throughout your day, say, is this true? Or does this feel familiar? Your truth filter is this absolute truth or relative truth? Anchor your body on the floor. Put your hand on your heart. Breathe in really deep and long exhale. Just exhale slowly and tell your body, we are safe enough here to stay aligned. Ernest Holmes, who is a New Thought leader, he taught that principle is not moved by appearances. Thomas Troward taught that universal law responds according to the nature impressed upon it, meaning do not worship appearances. Work with universal law. If you only work with the ones I just talked about on this podcast this week or over the next 2 weeks before the next episode comes out, you will have gained so much insight about your thoughts creating your feelings and your feelings creating frequency of emotion. And that emotion attracts the very thing that you're feeling. So you get to keep feeling it over and over. So one of the big, powerful questions I like to ask is, how does truth heal? How does absolute truth heal? And the truth is, everything is in divine order here. The truth is, there is oneness. When you look at it through the lens of quantum physics or spirituality or any way of looking at this stuff through science, physics, religion, spirituality, ancient wisdom, that's where we find absolute truth. They all will point to the same, that we have a creator, whether it's an energy atom that exploded or God. Call it whatever you want. We exist, therefore we were created by something, right? So truth sees the perfection of that. And knowing that what was created perfectly aligns to absolute truth. If you are confused, if you're tired of proving yourself out there, if you keep collapsing under pressure, if you keep leaving what you know to be true and absolute truth, then please hear me. You do not have to agree, and you don't need everyone to agree with you and your relative truth. Let it go. You need to root yourself in those absolute truths. And the truth is that you matter. Your life matters. The choices you create matter, and they carry consequences. They carry an effect. Every choice we make has an effect. Boundaries should be treated as sacred. Love is our strength. Consciousness is what shapes our reality. Growth is always available to us. Life responds to who you become. No external storm can uproot a woman planted in truth. I'm sorry I went over my hour. I don't think I ever told anybody that this was a short podcast. And when I get passionate about something, I can't help myself. But I want to end with something. This is what I want to say. First of all, next episode is about, it's just a whole nother layer of sovereignty. It's the second half of this series. We're just getting into it. So I invite you back. Please subscribe or do whatever. I don't even know what you have to do out there. Like it, follow, subscribe so that you get the alert that this new podcast is out. And you stay with me through this course of thought. Really take to heart what all this means. This is how we heal. This is how we change the world. This is how we create our life in alignment and get into what I call flow state. This is what gives us permission to fully feel and express all of life. I guess it would be nice to float the surface and never really experience the depth of life, but or the breadth or the height. So expansive. There is a limitless amount of expansion living inside of us. And I'm just here to be a part of it all. And so I invite you back to the next episode. I thank you for being here. And if you want to hang around, I'm going to actually do what I call it's a spiritual mind treatment for our closing today. And if you don't want to stick around for that, you can say farewell for now, and we'll see you at next podcast. Okay. But if you're with me and you want this spiritual mind treatment or AKA prayer or a thought form, just kind of bring your hands together. If you're driving, don't close your eyes. Just listen deeply. Come into the space where we are one. Come into this quiet space of stillness. breathe. Breathe the breath of that oneness, slowly exhaling. Recognize that there is one life, one presence, one infinite intelligence that's expressing itself through all of us. That life lives now as me and as every one of you. I recognize the divine authority within. I declare that fear no longer governs us, that wounds no longer define us or create our identity, that conditioning no longer leads us, that we return now to truth, that we are steady, that we are wise, that we are guided, that we can trust cause and effect, that we can trust the oneness through our consciousness. We are one. That we can trust the law of reciprocity. We trust that each aligned choice creates a new future. I give thanks for sovereignty awakening now in every heart that is listening. That truth seeks truth, and that truth heals, seeing the perfection of what is being created, and understanding that our soul actually learns through polarity, and that in the divine, in our own divinity, nothing gets wasted. That when we're devoted to the work, we're devoted to living truth. I will be me who loves. I will be me who is love. I can make peace with where I am, and in doing so, I experience self-love. This is sovereignty. I release. And as we say together, and so it is. Please remember, truth is not what shouts the loudest. Truth is what remains when the shaking and the fear is silenced. Have a wonderful 2 weeks exploring your own sovereignty. I appreciate you so much for sticking with me today. It was a long episode, but such a powerful episode. So thank you for being here. I look forward to our next session together, and I would love to hear from you. And please, if you know someone who's going through something where fear is taking root, share this episode, invite them into the series. I hope my words are healing. I hope they're thought-provoking. I hope they're disruptive to false identities. I hope things I said maybe made you uncomfortable, because that is fear feeling threatened by an absolute truth. So go explore that. I want to say don't be mad at me, but that would be looking for external validation. So it's okay if you are. I like to be liked. I'm still working on that one. I'm not a big disruptor of that. So maybe my people pleasing has morphed into just trying to be liked and included, but I just need to like myself, you guys. I need to be included in my own sovereignty. And so when I hear my language and I hear those identities, I'm always taking them on. I love this work. I love that you're here doing this work. And I just invite you into any and all that you want to participate in. Okay? And if you're curious about identities, I have to tell you again, invite you to go to www.sacredwisdomretreats.com. And you can read about our upcoming Costa Rica 6-day retreat. It is all about identity, identity shifting, getting to the core of who you are and taking on, all of the ways that we present ourselves with false identities, because those false identities rob us of our sovereignty and complicate our life in more ways than you even know. So go read about it and reach out if you're interested. Please share, please like, please subscribe. Your support of this little podcast means everything to me. So I thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Go have a great 2 weeks. Always live life with love.